20 years. That's how long we had been married when my wife asked the question. 20 years of shared mornings, shared bills, shared problems, shared silence. We weren't the kind of couple people stared at in restaurants. We didn't hold hands everywhere. We didn't post anniversary photos with long captions about forever love. But we worked. At least I thought we did. We were steady. And after 2 decades together, I believed steady was the same thing as safe. That night started like any other night. Nothing dramatic. No music playing in the background. No argument building up. No warning signs flashing in my head. Just leftovers on the stove and the sound of the dishwasher humming like it always did. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, scrolling on her phone. I remember noticing how calm she looked. Not nervous. Not distracted. Calm. Too calm. I was halfway through talking about work, some boring story about a meeting that went nowhere, when she put her phone down. Slowly. Like she didn't want to startle me. She looked at me and said, "Can I ask you something?" That sentence alone shouldn't scare anyone. But when it comes from someone you've known for 20 years, you can feel when it carries weight. "Sure," I said. "What's up?" She took a breath. Not a deep one. Just enough to prepare herself. "What would you think," she said carefully, "about opening our relationship?" I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because my brain didn't understand what it had just heard. "Opening our relationship?" I repeated. She nodded. No smile. No tension. Just calm agreement, like she had rehearsed this moment in her head 100 times. "I've been thinking about it for a while," she said. "I think it could be healthy." Healthy. That word landed heavier than the question itself. My first thought wasn't anger. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't even fear. It was confusion. Because in my mind, open relationships were for people who were already broken. Or people who never wanted commitment in the first place. We were neither. At least I thought we weren't. "Why?" I asked. She leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. Not defensive. Comfortable. "I just feel like we've been the same people for a long time," she said. "I want us to grow. To explore. To be honest with each other." Honest. That word hit me too. My chest felt tight, like someone had slowly placed a weight on it. "Are you unhappy?" I asked. She paused. Just for a second. But I saw it. "I wouldn't say unhappy," she replied. "Just restless." Restless. I looked at her like she was someone I recognized, but didn't fully know anymore. We had raised kids together. We had buried family members together. We had survived layoffs, debt, sickness, stress. We had watched our dreams change shape over time. And now she was restless. "Is there someone else?" I asked. She shook her head immediately. "No. This isn't about another person." That answer should have comforted me. It didn't. Because the truth is, if she had said yes, if there was already someone else, it would have made more sense. This felt worse. Like the ground shifting under my feet for reasons I couldn't see. "I love you," she added quickly. "This doesn't change that." That sentence hurt more than anything else she said. Because when someone tells you they love you while asking for permission to step outside the marriage, it makes you question what love even means anymore. I didn't answer right away. My mind raced through 20 years of memories. Our wedding day. The tiny apartment we could barely afford. The nights we stayed up worrying about money. The way she used to fall asleep on my shoulder during movies. When did this version of her replace that one? "I don't want to lose you," I finally said. She softened at that. Reached across the table. Put her hand over mine. "You won't," she said. "This isn't about leaving." I nodded slowly. But something inside me whispered. People don't ask questions like this unless they're already halfway gone. That night, after we went to bed, I stared at the ceiling while she slept beside me. She slept peacefully. I didn't. I replayed the conversation again and again, searching for hidden meaning, searching for mistakes I might have made, searching for signs I had missed. Was I boring now? Had I stopped being enough? Had I failed without even realizing it? I didn't confront her again that night, or the next day, or the day after that. Instead, I watched. I noticed how she seemed lighter, how the question didn't weigh on her the way it crushed me, how she went about her day like something heavy had been lifted off her shoulders. That scared me more than anything. A week later, she brought it up again. "I don't want you to feel pressured," she said, "but I think this could actually make us closer." Closer. I nodded, even though my heart felt like it was sinking. She pulled out a notebook. A notebook. When did this version of her replace that one? "I don't want to lose you," I finally said. She softened at that, reached across the table, put her hand over mine. "You won't," she said. "This isn't about leaving." I nodded slowly, but something inside me whispered, people don't ask questions like this unless they're already halfway gone. That night, after we went to bed, I stared at the ceiling while she slept beside me. She slept peacefully. I didn't. I replayed the conversation again and again, searching for hidden meaning, searching for mistakes I might have made, searching for signs I had missed. Was I boring now? Had I stopped being enough? Had I failed without even realizing it? I didn't confront her again that night, or the next day, or the day after that. Instead, I watched. I noticed how she seemed lighter, how the question didn't weigh on her the way it crushed me, how she went about her day like something heavy had been lifted off her shoulders. That scared me more than anything. A week later, she brought it up again. "I don't want you to feel pressured," she said, "but I think this could actually make us closer." Closer. I nodded, even though my heart felt like it was sinking. She pulled out a notebook. A notebook. She opened it and started explaining. Rules. Boundaries. Conditions. Agreements. She had thought this through. A lot. No emotional attachments, she said. Total honesty. No secrets. But as she spoke, something strange happened. The rules felt one-sided. Not unfair. Just oddly shaped. Like they were designed around someone who already knew what they wanted. I asked questions. Careful ones. Quiet ones. She answered without hesitation. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a discussion. It was a presentation. She wasn't asking if we should open the relationship. She was explaining how. That night, I stood in the bathroom staring at my reflection. I looked older than I remembered. Tired. Worn down in small ways that had piled up over time. I wondered if this was just what marriage turned into. Two people aging in different directions. One brave enough to say it out loud. The other too afraid to stop it. I didn't want to lose her. So I said I needed time. She agreed. Easily. Too easily. Over the next few weeks, something strange happened. She didn't push. She didn't nag. She didn't seem impatient. She acted relieved. Like the hardest part was already over. That's when a new fear crept in. What if this wasn't about opening the marriage at all? What if this was about closing a chapter, slowly, quietly, without making noise? I started noticing details I had ignored before. The way she guarded her phone, not suspicious, just intentional. The way she planned her schedule without including me. The way she talked about the future using words like I instead of we. One evening, she came home smiling. Not excited. When you've been married for 20 years, you don't suddenly panic. You don't slam doors. You don't throw accusations. You do something worse. You replay your entire life. That's what happened after I agreed to the open relationship. Nothing changed right away. That's what made it strange. She didn't rush out of the house dressed differently. She didn't stay out late. She didn't suddenly act secretive. If anything, she became calmer. Lighter. like a person who had finally said something they'd been holding in for a very long time. And I became someone else entirely. I started noticing things I had ignored for years, not because they were hidden, but because I never thought I needed to look. When you trust someone completely, you stop paying attention. Now, attention was all I had. We met when we were young. Too young to know who we really were. She was ambitious. Curious. Always talking about places she wanted to see and things she wanted to do. One day, I was steady. Practical. The kind of man who believed that if you worked hard and stayed loyal, life would reward you eventually. We balanced each other. Or at least, that's the story I told myself. We struggled early on. Money was tight. We shared a car. Sometimes dinner was whatever we could stretch for one more night. But we were together. And that felt like enough. When the kids came, life became loud. Busy. Exhausting. Love turned into logistics. Who's picking them up? Who's working late? Who forgot to pay the bill? Romance didn't disappear overnight. It faded slowly, like a photo left in the sun. And we didn't panic. Because everyone told us this was normal. This is marriage, people said. Just a phase, they said. It comes back. So we waited. Years passed. The kids grew up. And the phase never ended. Looking back now, I realize how quiet our marriage became. Not the peaceful kind of quiet. The empty kind. We talked about schedules, groceries, plans. But we didn't talk about fears. Or dreams. Or loneliness. And the truth is, I didn't ask. Because I thought silence meant contentment. I thought if she wasn't complaining, everything was fine. That's how men like me survive long marriages. We confuse calm with happiness. She never yelled. Never accused. Never demanded. She just slowly stepped inward. And I didn't follow. Years ago, she stopped asking for my opinion. At first, I thought it was confidence. Independence. Then she stopped sharing small things. Work stress. Friend drama. Random thoughts. I already handled it, she'd say. I thought she was strong. I didn't realize she was separating. She started spending more time alone, not suspiciously, just intentionally. Long walks. Quiet coffee shop visits. Weekend mornings where she'd sit by herself reading while I watched TV. We were together, but not connected. And I told myself that was maturity. After she asked for the open relationship, every memory rewrote itself. Moments I thought were harmless suddenly felt loaded. Every silence felt intentional. Every distance felt chosen. I started asking myself questions I had avoided for years. Was she ever really happy with me? Or was I just safe? Convenient? Reliable? Did she love me, or the life we built? Those questions are dangerous when you're already afraid. What scared me most wasn't that she wanted something different. It was that she already knew what she wanted. She talked about growth and honesty with the confidence of someone who had already crossed the emotional bridge. I was still standing at the edge. She talked like this was an evolution. I felt like it was an ending. But I didn't say that. Because when you're afraid of losing someone, you become careful with your words. Too careful. One night, we talked about our early years together. I expected nostalgia. What I got was distance. She spoke like she was describing someone else's life. We were young, she said. We didn't really know what we were doing. There was no warmth in her voice. No regret either. Just facts. I realized something painful in that moment. She had already stepped outside the marriage emotionally. She was looking back at it, not from inside, but from above. A few days later, she brought up the rules again. She didn't change them. She clarified them. That mattered. She talked about honesty, but only in ways that protected her peace. She talked about transparency, but avoided details. I don't think we need to know everything, she said. That would just hurt. That sentence stuck with me. Because honesty that avoids discomfort isn't honesty. It's management. She was managing something. I just didn't know what yet. I started keeping secrets from myself. I didn't tell friends. I didn't tell family. Not because I was embarrassed, but because saying it out loud would make it real. So I kept it inside. And inside it grew. I stopped sleeping well. I lost interest in things I used to enjoy. I smiled more around her, trying to prove I was okay. Inside, I felt like I was slowly disappearing. The moment I realized I was alone. One evening, we sat on the couch watching a show. At some point, I reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. She just didn't notice. Her mind was somewhere else. That moment broke something in me. Because intimacy isn't just physical. It's presence. And she wasn't present anymore. When I asked the wrong question, I finally asked her something that had been burning in my chest. Have you been unhappy for a long time? She didn't answer right away. That pause told me everything. I think I stopped asking myself that question years ago, she said. Years. I nodded like I understood. I didn't. Because what she really said was this. She had already processed the pain. I hadn't even started. The shift from we to me. I noticed how often she used I now. I think. I want. I feel. We only appeared when talking about logistics. Bills. House. Responsibilities. Love had become singular. I realized I was the only one grieving. She wasn't sad. She wasn't conflicted. She wasn't emotional. I was. That imbalance terrified me. Because when two people face change together, they struggle together. When only one person struggles, it means the other has already moved on. I remembered a conversation from years ago. She had asked, "Do you think people can outgrow each other?" I laughed and said, "Only if they stop trying." She didn't laugh back. I didn't think about it again. Until now. This part hurt the most. Because the more I replayed our life together, the more I saw how alone she must have felt. How many times had she waited for me to notice? How many times had she hoped I'd ask deeper questions? How many times had she chosen silence because speaking felt useless? I wasn't cruel. I wasn't unfaithful. But I was absent in quiet ways. And absence can be just as damaging. This realization changed everything. I stopped feeling angry. I started feeling guilty. And guilt makes you compliant. It makes you accept things you shouldn't. It makes you say yes when you want to scream no. One afternoon, she mentioned finances casually. "I think we should start organizing things better," she said. "Just in case." Just in case of what? She didn't say. But her tone did. That's when I felt it. She wasn't exploring possibilities. She was preparing for outcomes. I wanted to ask her, "Do you still see a future with me?" But I didn't. Because if the answer was no, everything would collapse. And I wasn't ready for that. Once the decision was made, something strange happened. We didn't celebrate it. We didn't argue about it. We didn't even talk about it much. Life just continued. And that scared me. Because when something this big changes your marriage, you expect noise, emotion, chaos. Instead, there was calm. Too much calm. The rules were written, agreed on, put away like a document that didn't need to be opened again. That should have comforted me. It didn't. The rules felt clean, too clean. On paper, everything sounded fair. No emotional attachments. No bringing anyone home. No secrets. Total honesty. She said it all with confidence, like someone explaining a plan they'd already tested in their head. But when I listened closely, I realized something important. The rules protected her peace. Not our marriage. Not my emotions. Her peace. Whenever I asked a question that made her uncomfortable, she gently shut it down. "I don't think details help," she'd say. "We agreed honesty doesn't mean hurting each other." That sentence confused me. Because what does honesty mean if it avoids truth? I noticed who wasn't participating. Days passed. then weeks. She didn't rush into anything, or at least, that's what it looked like. I didn't rush into anything either. Actually, I didn't do anything at all. I tried to imagine myself dating someone else. I couldn't. The idea felt wrong. Not morally, emotionally. It felt like I'd be borrowing a life that wasn't mine yet. She, on the other hand, seemed prepared. Not excited. Not nervous. Prepared. That difference mattered. The first shift I couldn't ignore. One morning, I woke up early and found her already dressed. That wasn't unusual. What was unusual was the way she checked herself in the mirror. Not vanity. Assessment. Like she was making sure everything was in place. "Big day?" I asked. She smiled softly. "Just meetings." Meetings. I watched her leave, and for the first time in 20 years, I wondered who she was becoming when I wasn't around. That thought stayed with me all day. She stopped asking permission. This is a small thing. Most people wouldn't notice it. But after 20 years of marriage, you notice patterns. She used to say things like, "Is it okay if I'm out late? Do you mind if I make plans?" Now she said, "I'll be out tonight. I have plans." She wasn't being rude. She was being independent. And independence, when it arrives suddenly in a long marriage, isn't always healthy. Sometimes it's a sign someone has already detached. The first night I was alone with my thoughts. She came home late one evening. Not suspiciously late. Just late enough. I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to hear answers I wasn't ready for. She went straight to the shower. I sat on the edge of the bed and listened to the water run. That sound, steady, uninterrupted, felt louder than it should have. That night, lying next to her, I realized something painful. I wasn't jealous. I was grieving. Grieving something I couldn't name yet. The honesty that wasn't shared. Days later, I asked her gently, "Have you met anyone yet?" She didn't hesitate. "No." She said it smoothly. Easily. Too easily. That answer should have settled my mind. Instead, it raised a new question. Why did it feel rehearsed? The way she spoke about me. One afternoon, she mentioned talking to a friend. "She thinks it's brave," she said. "Brave of us." Us. But something felt off. The way she said it didn't include me emotionally. It felt like she was telling a story about us, not living inside it. That night, I realized something that hurt more than any betrayal. She had started seeing our marriage from the outside. I began paying attention to small things. When trust cracks, you don't suddenly become suspicious. You become observant. I noticed how often her phone was on silent. How she angled the screen away, not hiding, just instinctively. How she smiled at messages but never shared what they were about. Nothing dramatic. Nothing obvious. But she was being independent. And independence, when it arrives suddenly in a long marriage, isn't always healthy. Sometimes it's a sign someone has already detached. The first night I was alone with my thoughts. She came home late one evening. Not suspiciously late. Just late enough. I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to hear answers I wasn't ready for. She went straight to the shower. I sat on the edge of the bed and listened to the water run. That sound, steady, uninterrupted, felt louder than it should have. That night, lying next to her, I realized something painful. I wasn't jealous. I was grieving. Grieving something I couldn't name yet. The honesty that wasn't shared. Days later, I asked her gently, "Have you met anyone yet?" She didn't hesitate. "No." She said it smoothly. Easily. Too easily. That answer should have settled my mind. Instead, it raised a new question. Why did it feel rehearsed? The way she spoke about me. One afternoon, she mentioned talking to a friend. "She thinks it's brave," she said. "Brave of us." Us. But something felt off. The way she said it didn't include me emotionally. It felt like she was telling a story about us, not living inside it. That night, I realized something that hurt more than any betrayal. She had started seeing our marriage from the outside. I began paying attention to small things. When trust cracks, you don't suddenly become suspicious. You become observant. I noticed how often her phone was on silent. How she angled the screen away, not hiding, just instinctively. How she smiled at messages but never shared what they were about. Nothing dramatic. Nothing obvious. But patterns don't need drama to be real. The conversation that made my stomach drop. One evening, out of nowhere, she said, "I'm really glad the first real discovery didn't happen the way people imagine betrayal usually happens. There was no lipstick on a collar. No late-night phone call that ended too fast. No dramatic confession. It happened quietly. On an ordinary afternoon. The kind of moment you only recognize as important after it changes everything. It was a weekday. Middle of the week. Nothing special. I came home earlier than usual. Work ended sooner than expected, and for once, I didn't tell her I was on my way. Not out of suspicion. Out of habit. She wasn't home yet. I put my keys down, poured myself a glass of water, and stood there in the kitchen, listening to the silence of the house. That silence had become familiar. Too familiar. I sat down at the table and opened my laptop, planning to distract myself with work emails. That's when I noticed it. A notebook. Not the one she used for the rules. This one was different. Smaller. Thinner. Tucked halfway under a stack of papers. I wouldn't have touched it if it had been closed. But it wasn't. Just open enough for one line to show. One line that didn't belong to grocery lists or schedules. A name. A name I recognized. It wasn't a stranger's name. That's what scared me. It was someone from our past. Someone who existed before the open relationship conversation. Someone who existed inside our life. An old coworker. A friend from years ago. A name I had heard casually, without concern. Seeing it written down, neatly, deliberately, felt different. This wasn't a flirtation. This wasn't curiosity. This was intention. My first instinct was to close the notebook and pretend I hadn't seen anything. I didn't want to cross that line. But the line had already crossed me. I sat there staring at the page, my mind racing. Why write his name down? Why now? And why so carefully? What I didn't find mattered more. I didn't flip through the notebook. That's important. I didn't read messages. I didn't search her phone. I didn't dig. Because something about this felt different. This wasn't a secret affair. This felt organized. Thought through. Planned. And that realization unsettled me more than any hidden romance could have. I put everything back exactly how it was. I closed the notebook. Placed it back under the papers. Not because I respected privacy, but because I wanted to see what would happen next. I wanted to know if this was a coincidence. Or a pattern. When she came home. She walked in an hour later. Same calm expression. Same relaxed posture. "How was your day?" she asked. "Fine," I said. She smiled and went to put her bag down. I watched her movements closely. She didn't rush to the table. She didn't check the papers. She didn't seem worried. That meant one thing. She wasn't afraid of being discovered. Because she didn't think she was hiding anything. That realization chilled me. The question I didn't ask. I wanted to ask her about the name. I didn't. Not because I was scared of her reaction. But because I was scared of my own. I wasn't ready to hear explanations. I needed more clarity. More context. Something solid. The pattern started forming. Over the next few days, small things added up. Nothing dramatic. Just details that lined up too neatly. She mentioned running into someone. From the past. She talked about closure, without explaining what needed closing. She used phrases like, unfinished chapters. None of it was sexual. None of it broke the rules. But all of it pointed to something deeper. Something older. something emotional. I realized this wasn't about newness. This wasn't about exploring new experiences. This wasn't about excitement. This was about resolution. She wasn't chasing something new. She was returning to something unfinished. And that scared me more than any affair ever could. Because unfinished emotional business doesn't fade. It waits. The moment I connected the dots. One night, while clearing emails, I noticed something else. A calendar entry. Nothing explicit. Just a block of time marked off regularly. Same day each week. Same duration. No description. Just blocked. I stared at it longer than I should have. Because people don't block time for accidents. They block time for priorities. I finally admitted the truth to myself. This wasn't an open relationship experiment. This was a controlled transition. She wasn't asking, "Can we try something new?" She was asking, "Can you slowly get used to the idea of not being my center anymore?" And I had said yes. Why this hurt more than cheating? Cheating is chaos. This was order. Cheating is impulse. This was strategy. Cheating breaks trust suddenly. This was dissolving it carefully, without explosions, without blame. She wasn't betraying me in the traditional sense. She was outgrowing me quietly. And that realization broke something deep inside my chest. The night I finally spoke up. That night, I asked her something simple. "Are you happy right now?" She looked at me for a long moment. Not surprised. Not defensive. Thoughtful. "I'm at peace," she said. Peace. That word told me everything I needed to know. Because peace doesn't come from confusion. It comes from decisions already made. How Act 4 ends. I went to bed that night knowing one thing for sure. Whatever she was doing, whatever she was preparing for, it had started long before she ever asked for an open relationship. And the worst part? I wasn't discovering a betrayal. I was discovering that I had been slowly replaced. Not by another man, but by a future she had already chosen without me. The truth doesn't arrive all at once. It doesn't kick down the door. It seeps in slowly, through cracks you didn't know were there, until one day you realize the room is flooded and you never heard the water coming. That's what happened to me. After the notebook. After the calendar blocks. After the way she said she was at peace. I stopped asking what she was doing. I started asking when it had started. And once I asked that question, everything changed. The most dangerous question. When you suspect cheating, you ask, "Who is it?" When you suspect something worse, you ask, "How long have I been living in the wrong reality?" That question haunted me. Because the signs weren't new. They were old. Very old. I just hadn't known how to read them. The day I found the file. It happened by accident. Again. That's how all the worst truths enter your life, quietly, without permission. She asked me to look for an insurance document on the computer. Something boring. Something normal. I typed in the folder name. And that's when I saw it. A folder I didn't recognize. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't locked. It was just there. Neatly labeled. Inside were documents I had never seen before. Budgets. Spreadsheets. Notes. Some of them dated back years. That's when my hands started shaking. Because people don't plan exits overnight. They plan them slowly, carefully, and emotionally detached. What the documents said without saying it. There were projections. Not dreams. Not hopes. Projections. Living expenses. Housing scenarios. Savings breakdowns. 2 columns stood out. Current. Independent. Independent. Not. Together. Not. Future US. Independent. My name didn't appear once. Not even as an option. That's when the truth hit me so hard I had to sit down. She hadn't been exploring freedom. She had been designing a life without me. The open relationship was never the point. The open relationship wasn't about desire. It wasn't about curiosity. It wasn't even about dissatisfaction. It was a transition tool, a psychological buffer, a way to slowly loosen the emotional bond without tearing it. She didn't want to shock me. She wanted to soften me, so that when the final truth came, I wouldn't explode. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't fight. I would already be tired. And tired people accept things they would never accept at full strength. Why this was worse than cheating. Cheating is betrayal in the moment. This was betrayal across time. Cheating lies to your face. This rewrote the past. She hadn't just stepped outside the marriage. She had quietly stepped out of the shared story. She had been living a parallel emotional life while I was still invested in us. And the worst part? She wasn't cruel. She wasn't malicious. She was careful. The realization that broke me. I realized something that made my chest feel hollow. She wasn't trying to hurt me. She was trying to avoid feeling guilty. And that made me invisible. Because guilt requires acknowledging the damage you're doing. She didn't want to damage me. She wanted to detach from me gently. Like easing your hand away from something you no longer want to hold. The conversation I couldn't avoid anymore. That night I didn't accuse her. I didn't yell. I didn't even mention the documents. I asked her one simple question. When did you start imagining a life without me? She froze. Not shocked. Not angry. Just still. That pause lasted longer than any argument ever could. I don't know, she said finally. But her eyes told the truth. She did know. She just hadn't planned on saying it out loud. What she said next changed everything. I think, she said slowly, that I stayed longer than I should have. That sentence ended the marriage. Not legally. Emotionally. Because it meant she hadn't been choosing me for years. She had been enduring me. And endurance isn't love. It's obligation. The confession that wasn't about another man. She didn't confess an affair. She confessed something worse. I didn't want to be the bad person, she said. I didn't want to hurt you. I nodded. Because now I understood. She didn't want to hurt me suddenly. She wanted to hurt me gradually, so it wouldn't feel like her fault. The open relationship was never freedom. It was anesthesia. The moment I saw our marriage clearly, I saw the last few years through new eyes. Her calm, her distance, her preparation. She had already grieved the marriage. I was just starting. That imbalance was unbearable. Why I couldn't even be angry. I wanted to scream. I wanted to accuse her of manipulation. But something stopped me. She looked relieved. Not because she had hurt me, but because she had finally stopped pretending. And that's when I realized the most painful truth of all. She hadn't lied about loving me. She had just stopped loving me while still living with me. The sentence I'll never forget. She said it quietly. I didn't want you to hate me. I looked at her and thought. You should have been more afraid of me being broken. Because hatred heals faster than confusion. What I lost that night. I didn't just lose my wife. I lost my sense of shared history. My confidence in long-term love. My belief that loyalty guarantees safety. I realized that commitment doesn't protect you from abandonment. It only delays it. The final understanding of Act 5. The open relationship wasn't the betrayal. The betrayal was discovering that I had been emotionally alone for years. Sleeping next to someone who had already said goodbye in her heart. That's why this was worse than cheating. Because cheating steals moments. This stole time. Years of it. Years I would never get back. After the truth came out, something unexpected happened. Nothing. No slammed doors. No raised voices. No dramatic ultimatums. Just silence. The kind of silence that feels heavier than noise, because it's filled with things that can't be taken back. We sat across from each other at the same kitchen table where this all began. Same chairs. Same light above us. Same house we built together. But it didn't feel like our house anymore. It felt like neutral ground. Why I didn't yell? People always ask later, "Why didn't you lose it?" I didn't yell because yelling comes from shock. And I wasn't shocked anymore. I was clear. Clear about what had happened. Clear about how long it had been happening. Clear about the fact that this wasn't a mistake. This was a decision, made slowly, over years. Yelling wouldn't change that. The conversation that finally happened. I asked her something I had avoided for a long time. "Why didn't you just tell me?" She looked down at her hands. "I tried," she said. That answer made me flinch. "Not like this," she continued. "Not all at once." I was scared. "Of what?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. Then she said something I'll never forget. "Of destroying you." That sentence should have sounded caring. It didn't. Because protecting someone from pain by lying to them isn't protection. It's control. What she admitted, fully. Once the truth started, it didn't stop. She admitted she had been emotionally checked out for years. Not angry. Not resentful. Just done. "I kept hoping it would come back," she said. "The feeling. The closeness." I nodded slowly. Because I had hoped the same thing. The difference? I stayed present while hoping. She stayed quiet. "The open relationship," re-explained. I asked her directly. "Was the open relationship ever about us?" She didn't lie. "No," she said. That one word landed harder than any confession of cheating ever could. She explained it calmly. She said she needed space to imagine herself differently, without immediately destroying the life we built. She said she needed to know she could survive on her own before making a final decision. She said she didn't want to blindside me. Every sentence sounded reasonable. Every sentence hurt. Because what she was really saying was this. She was preparing for freedom. I was preparing for reconciliation. The moment I realized we were in different stages. There's a moment in every ending when you realize the two of you are standing in completely different places emotionally. This was ours. She was relieved. I was shattered. Not because she was cruel, but because she was finished. Grief looks different when you've already processed it. She had already cried her tears. I was just beginning. Why she couldn't look at me? At one point, she stopped meeting my eyes. Not out of shame. Out of discomfort. Because when someone has already left emotionally, facing the pain they caused feels unnecessary. They don't want to reopen a chapter they've already closed. That realization hurt more than anger ever could. The truth about the other person. I finally asked about the name. The one in the notebook. She didn't deny it. "It wasn't an affair," she said quickly. "And it wasn't physical." That almost made it worse. Because emotional reconnection, especially with someone from the past, isn't about curiosity. It's about validation. She admitted that talking to him made her feel seen again. Not desired. Seen. That stung. Because I had seen her for years. I just hadn't known she needed to be seen differently. The question that broke my voice. I asked the one question I was afraid to ask. "Did you ever plan on staying?" She hesitated. That hesitation was the answer. "I didn't know," she said finally. But deep down, we both knew. People don't plan exits for years if they're still hoping to stay. The moment I stopped defending us, something shifted inside me during that conversation. I stopped trying to save the marriage. Not because I stopped loving her, but because I realized I was the only one fighting for something that already ended. Love can't survive alone. It needs two people choosing it, every day. She had stopped choosing. The saddest realization of all. Here's the part that took me the longest to accept. She wasn't wrong for wanting more from life. She wasn't wrong for outgrowing the marriage. She was wrong for taking me along for the ride without telling me where we were headed. She didn't cheat on my body. She cheated on my time. When I finally spoke my truth, I said something calm. Simple. "I wish you had trusted me enough to let me go earlier." She closed her eyes. That's when I knew. That was the guilt she had been trying to avoid. Not guilt for leaving. Guilt for staying too long. The decision that didn't feel like a decision. We didn't officially end things that night. But we both knew. The marriage was already over. All that was left was logistics. Timing. Paperwork. The emotional ending had already happened, years ago. I was just finally being invited into it. Endings don't usually come with dramatic speeches. Most of the time, they arrive in small, ordinary moments. A toothbrush moved to a different drawer. A calendar event deleted instead of rescheduled. A silence that no longer feels temporary. That's how our marriage ended. Not with a fight, but with acceptance. The days after the conversation. The days after our final conversation felt unreal. We still lived in the same house. Still spoke politely. Still asked practical questions. But something was gone. Not love. Expectation. The expectation that we were heading somewhere together. Once that disappears, everything changes. We started talking about logistics. Who would move out? How we'd divide things. What we'd tell people. Those conversations were calm. Too calm. Because emotional distance had already done most of the work. The moment I knew it was really over. One morning, I made coffee for both of us out of habit. I poured her cup. Then realized she wasn't there. She had already left for the day without saying goodbye. That shouldn't have hurt. But it did. Because I realized something important. She wasn't avoiding me. She just wasn't thinking about me anymore. And that's when I knew this wasn't something we could fix. Moving out doesn't feel like freedom. A few weeks later, I moved out. Not dramatically. Just boxes. Clothes. Books. A few memories that fit into cardboard. I stood in the doorway one last time and looked around. That house held decades of our lives. And yet, it felt empty. Not because she had taken something, but because what mattered had already left. The loneliness that came after. People assume that once the truth comes out, things get easier. They don't. The clarity helps. But the loneliness still arrives. Late at night. Early in the morning. In moments you expect to share with someone who no longer exists in that role. I missed her. Not the woman she had become, but the woman she used to be. And grieving that version of her felt like grieving a person who never really died, but also never came back. What I learned about myself. I had to face uncomfortable truths too. I wasn't a bad husband. But I wasn't a fully present one either. I confused stability with connection. Routine with intimacy. Silence with peace. I thought showing up physically was enough. I didn't realize emotional presence mattered just as much. That realization hurt. But it also gave me something valuable. Responsibility without self-hate. Why I don't hate her. People often expect anger at the end of stories like this. I don't feel it. Anger would mean I still needed something from her. I don't. I understand her now. She didn't leave to hurt me. She left because she didn't know how to stay without losing herself. That doesn't make it painless. But it makes it human. The difference between betrayal and truth. Here's the lesson that took me the longest to accept. Not every betrayal looks like cheating. Some betrayals look like silence. Avoidance. Emotional withdrawal that happens so slowly you don't notice until it's complete. And sometimes, the person doing it doesn't even realize they're doing it. They're just surviving. The hard truth about long love. Long marriages don't usually end because of one big mistake. They end because of small disconnections that go unspoken. Because people change, but don't say how. Because love turns into maintenance instead of curiosity. Because fear keeps people quiet when honesty feels dangerous. That's what happened to us. What I would do differently now. If I could go back, I wouldn't beg her to stay. I wouldn't agree to an open relationship out of fear. I wouldn't sacrifice my self-respect just to delay loss. I would ask harder questions earlier. I would listen more deeply. And if the answers still led to the same ending, I would walk away sooner, with dignity intact. If you're watching this and you're married, Don't assume silence means everything is okay. Ask real questions. Have uncomfortable conversations. Stay curious about the person you share your life with. Because love doesn't disappear overnight. It fades quietly, when no one is paying attention. The open relationship wasn't the worst part. The worst part was discovering that I had been alone in my marriage long before it officially ended. That's what made it worse than cheating. Cheating breaks trust. This broke reality. I'm rebuilding. Slowly. Not chasing love. Not afraid of it either. Just honest. With myself first. And that honesty feels like peace. Real peace. Not the kind that comes from avoiding pain. The kind that comes from facing it and surviving. Sometimes, the most painful endings don't teach you how to love someone else better. They teach you how to stop abandoning yourself. And that lesson, as devastating as it is worth learning.